Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I'm Danielle Watson, the Vice President of Marketing for ROI Healthcare Solutions. And the title for today's webinar is ERP Business Intelligence, the Best Maturity Level for Your Success. You know, ROI Healthcare Solutions and Fortude, which are both Infor Alliance partners, are really excited to deliver a valuable message to you today. And we really want you to enjoy it. But first, before we get into the content, I want to go over a few housekeeping items for you. The first thing to know is that all attendees are muted. And we will have a dedicated Q&A portion of the call where you can either submit questions via the panel on the right-hand side of your screen where it says chat or questions. And you can also raise your hand. If you'd like me to unmute you, we can do that. Now, the only way that we can unmute you is if you are connected between your audio and your laptop or your device where you've logged in to GoToWebinar. So once you do that and your name is associated with both your audio and your device, we can unmute you and then allow you to ask your question if you choose to do it that way. If you have questions during the event, please send a chat message directly to me, Danielle Watson. If you're having technical issues or you have administrative or logistics types questions, you can also send me an email directly to danielle.watson@roihs.com. And just to let you know, we are recording today's presentation and we'll send you the recording as well as the presentation document within 48 hours of the event. Okay, so we have three incredible speakers today, all very experienced in the healthcare industry and with Infor, and I'd like for each of them to tell you a little bit about themselves, starting with Jenny Matson. Jenny?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jenny Matson with ROI Healthcare Solutions. Thank you for joining today, and Danielle, thank you for saying I'm incredible. I love that. So I have about 20 years of experience in Infor, in healthcare and other markets, but primarily focused in healthcare. I used to be with MHC, and many people still remember me from that and did a lot of webinars and things there. And so, you know, throughout that time, I think one of the things I can bring to the table is seeing many different implementations. When I started with MHC, we had one customer. When I left, we had 900. So each year I would do 30 to 50 implementations versus some of the folks we're working with who have done less. And that doesn't mean I probably knew less than they did, but I saw a trend. And that helps me be empathetic to what I think the clients you guys are going through, and to understand where some hurdles can come in that delivery folks don't always get to see. I'm in Minnesota, and as I talk more, you'll probably hear my big O's. But what I want to do now is turn this over to Ben and Aaron, kind of the big brains that we have on the call, to talk a little bit about their experience and how we can work together. Thank you. Ben?
Thanks, Jenny. My name is Ben Hoagland. I'm a supply chain consultant with ROI. And before I stepped into the consulting world, I was the director of business systems and informatics at a large university health system. And one of my claims to fame there was I improved their GHX ranking from number 323 in the country to number 11. Now, those of you that aren't familiar with the GHX ranking, it's essentially a measure of your supply chain procurement efficiency, essentially focused on EDI and exceptions that happen in the ordering process. I'm fanatical about efficiency, especially through the use of automation and analytics. And with that, I'll let Aaron talk a little bit about himself.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Aaron Epps. I'm the VP of Technical Services at Fortude. I have 15 years of experience in the healthcare industry. 12 of those years were spent at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where I'm currently based. And the last 3 years have been with Fortude in a consulting role. My primary responsibility with the organization is making sure that the delivery goes smoothly and we understand the technology and how to implement it effectively and efficiently for our customers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to talk a little bit about ROI and Fortude and our partnership.
Great. Thank you, Erin and Ben. So one of the reasons why Fortude, excuse me, Ben and I, or Erin and I talked about this. I tend to add vowels where I shouldn't. It's Fortude and ROI have partnered together is because we share different experience and levels, and we think together we can make our customers better. One of the reasons for that is ROI has a deep understanding of not only healthcare and Infor and sitting in both your shoes and being a consultant and understanding what KPIs are available. We can take all of that knowledge together, but we can also translate it to folks that are sitting on the other side of the business. There are so many different tools you can utilize to bring information forward. And so what we try to do in working with Fortude is to come up with what are the goals? What are some of the goals that are a little bit shorter term so we can establish some gains and then allow Fortude to come in and really take those and be able to recommend the best technologies and do it in a very prescriptive fashion that allows us to make some quick wins for the organization and be that translation tool between business requirements and IT. So everybody's on the same page, everybody can be successful, and together we think we bring that forward, and we've seen that proven with our clients. So who is ROI, in case you don't know about us? We've been an IT service partner since 1999, and we provide advisory services, implementation, and staffing and support. So in addition to our ERP practice, we have some capabilities, or a huge amount of capabilities, actually, in healthcare information systems. We started as a project management firm, providing clear goals around success, and that has helped us as we've added folks to put that methodology in place and make sure that we are leveraging that with our clients as we go forward. So, we do a lot of the things that other folks in the same areas do, but what we pride ourselves on is being somebody that you can come to and we will push back. We'll say, are you sure this is the right method for you to be doing this? And we'll do it in a kind and respectful and careful manner where everybody's involved and can, accept appropriate changes and leverage existing technologies or additional technologies. So if we can move forward, please. With our Infor practice, we have people that have all kind of come together, and I'll just use this as an opportunity. If folks know me from previous experience, when I decided that I was ready to leave MHC, I really only talked to one firm, and they were a smaller firm at that time, not anymore, and because I just respected the people. All the people that worked there had been doing great jobs for their clients for a long time, and that's where I wanted to go. And so, I'm so happy I did. I feel a lot of gratitude for the folks I work with, and Infor is the only ERP we support. We have a lot of faith in the Infor products. We specialize in cloud suite, health systems, and extended care. And we've completed our clients are folks, we close an engagement and they're satisfied, they know how to move forward, but then when they want to do the next thing, they trust us enough to ask us back, and that means the world to us. So I'm going to now turn it over to Aaron to talk a little bit about how Fortude works with us and a little bit of background on his company.
Thanks, Jenny. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the work with Fortude. We are based out of Rochester, Minnesota, and we are an Infor Global Alliance partner. And really our focus is on being the best analytics and business intelligence implementation partner in the market. And that's why it made sense for us to work with Fortude to come together on these projects. With ROI's business expertise, they bring in a lot of experience. They have functional consultants that have 15 to 20 years of experience and can work with the business. And then we work together with them to make sure that they clearly define what those business requirements are and that we can translate those into deliverable components for part of the project. So that model has worked out very well working with ROI. Again, they have that expertise to come in. They can bring in the supply chain consultant or the finance consultant or HR that has 15 or 20 years experience and can come in and really kind of play that devil's advocate as part of the implementation and ask the hard questions and talk about how we can leverage the technology to do the best improvement for your business area together. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jenny to talk about the focus of today's webinar.
Jenny? Jenny, we're not able to hear you right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I started beforehand. So I just wanted to say, today we're going to talk about some of the common challenges that we see related to visibility and analytics. And many of you are probably in the position of having to try to provide timely information to folks and have challenges doing that. And then how would business intelligence support your business goals and help alleviate some of that stress and visibility challenges? And then we will go into, really what you're looking for in terms of how do you get there? I mean, it's a huge goal, and how do you break it off into pieces that you can generate some success and move forward with? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ben to talk to you about his experiences in dealing with how to move forward along this continuum and to do it in a way that makes sense and gives your organization some confidence that you're actually moving forward and working together.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, there are many challenges that are present when you try to successfully implement a BI project. 7 common ones we've identified are the following. The system data cannot always be trusted. This was actually a big hang-up of mine when I was going through the process of implementing healthcare for analytics. I was worried that our system data wasn't clean enough. Now, we had just come off of a data cleansing effort, and I believe we were ranked around number 50 on the GHX ranking at the time. So our data wasn't bad, but I did notice anomalies almost on a daily basis, where we may have had a duplicate record or gaps in the data that I thought could present challenges while implementing this solution. However, going through the process, I understood that these challenges were unwarranted. Did we have some instances where the reports didn't come out correct, or maybe a KPI was a little off? Yes. But it allowed us to see those, basically bringing them to the forefront, and allowed us to change that data or our processes of collecting data so they didn't happen in the future. And within a short amount of time, we did have trusted reports, and our end users did trust the information we provided them. So to anybody out there that's using this as a reason for pause, I would say that in most cases that's not a good reason. Second, there's no clear unified definition of success. I mean, really what we're aiming for is providing the decision makers with the information to make decisions on a very timely basis. You know, they come in the morning, they have a dashboard in front of them that has all their KPIs and analytics and measures that really drive value for the business, along with actionable information. Without that, you're really just flying blind. You're going off of your gut. Maybe you're having your staff pull reports for you on hunches or just information you want to dig into, but it's not a repeatable process, and it's often time-consuming. Number 3, many are unaware of tools. And this usually isn't because you can't find information on tools in the market. It's because there's such a plethora of tools out there, it's difficult to figure out which ones are going to work best for your organization. I remember during the selection of tools, when we were implementing our BI system, I looked at everything. I looked at the so-called best in class or best of breed. And by the time I jotted all those down, there was a laundry list of different tools out there. And I remember thinking that my staff can't support all of that and become experts on each one of those tools. And this is one of the reasons that we did choose Infor Healthcare Analytics. And it was hindsight, it was a very good decision. Number 4, it's difficult to secure the right skill set when you're talking about creating data models. As I mentioned previously, it is difficult to find resources versed in the technology, but it is equally, if not more difficult, to find resources with the skills to create the data models that will be sufficient for the organization, especially when you start trying to tie in disparate systems, such as your clinical system and with your supply chain data. Number 5, oftentimes when there's a do-it-yourself BI project and IT is heading up, they'll go to the business owners or the business departments looking for people with that institutional knowledge that can help them build out these different analytical cubes. And oftentimes they're frustrated because they can't find the individuals with that knowledge due to either turnover, which creates a loss of that past experience or history. And so oftentimes it's difficult to find functional knowledge that's helpful when building a BI platform. Number 6, many organizations are not willing to make a commitment into BI because they don't view it as part of their long-term business strategy, but rather as a tool or a complex process, and ultimately as an unjustifiable expense. This happens when there's only lukewarm support by senior executives, and maybe the project's taking a little longer than expected, or deliverables aren't happening as regularly as they should. And so a fatigue can set in on the project within an organization. Despite all of these challenges, BI and analytics has remained a #1 CIO priority for the last 10 years, and I really don't see that changing anytime soon. However, even with this focus, many are still not happy with their implementation. There's a quote by Gartner that I think sums up some of these challenges very concisely. Finding, accessing, cleansing, combining, and transforming data in a trusted way is the biggest challenge. 85% of the time is spent preparing data. People are only doing what we're paying them to do 15% of the time. Next. In order to increase the odds of a successful BI project, there must be alignment in 5 core areas within the organization. Oftentimes, one or more of these areas are undervalued because the project is really thought of as strictly a technology project and not as a business project. These areas are business objectives and requirements. The most successful projects have buy-ins from the very top and are many times driven by senior executive support. It is an imperative to identify the metrics and KPIs that you feel will drive value and how stakeholders will be accountable to these metrics. When you don't have this, oftentimes you get into a BI project where the requirements aren't set forth in the beginning. And so during the build process, new and more requirements come forth. We call this scope creep. And this oftentimes causes project delays, which nobody wants. Second is technology. A BI platform should be chosen that enables the organization to get the most from their data with the least amount of effort and complexity. This is one of the reasons we recommend Infor's BI suite. And Aaron's going to talk about this a little later in the discussion about all the pre-built measures and KPIs and cubes that come along with this package. Number 3 is governance and standards. To have effective governance, there must be collaboration among business executives and business owners to define the strategy, processes, and rules for the data and BI deployment itself. A simple example might be a process that defines how departments request a new dashboard to be created. Or a more complex example might be getting together to define a new GL structure for maybe a cloud suite financials upgrade in order to get the most from the new GL attribute features. Functional and technical skills and experience. The organization must have a plan for maintaining the BI tools. BI is a specialized skill set and requires resources that either know the tools or are willing to commit to learn them. It is difficult sometimes to saddle your current resources with additional responsibility of learning, yet again, more software packages. Cross-departmental business benefits. A focus needs to be placed on looking at the process across business units and remove the old, antiquated, siloed analytics environment approach. Also, the user should be empowered to perform self-service analytics and reduce the friction to derive business insights. It's only when you have all of these different things aligned that a BI project really comes together and can become successful. Next. Analytics done correctly allows the organization to shift their analytics mindset. Not only will business process drive the business intelligence, but analytics will be responsible for creating new processes. I'll give you a couple examples of this. During our BI implementation, I wanted to create a more robust vendor scorecard. And one of the metrics I was interested in was % of on-time deliveries. We noticed when we were digging through healthcare analytics that this KPI wasn't coming out like we expected. And we found out the reason is that we weren't populating the information into Lawson correctly. We had a default lead time for all across vendors, and we didn't populate it by individual vendors. So what we had to do was we had to decide what the expected lead time by vendor was, populate this information into the system itself, and when we did that, the information flowed through and became a lot more valuable to us and enhanced our scorecard. So this is an example of where when you start to go through and implement a BI platform, oftentimes there'll be anomalies in the data. And it forces you to go back and look at the processes that you're using to input this information into the source system itself. And from there, by changing these processes, you can have better analytics and really better processes for your department as a whole. Now, there are some negative examples of this that I want you to be cognizant of. And one of them, a real-life example, was there was an organization that put a lot of emphasis on the metric inventory turnover. In fact, their materials managers were accountable to this metric. And naturally, what the materials managers did to boost this metric was they started taking in inventory that used to be just in time. Their vendor used to tote up packages for them or their items, set them on the dock so they could quickly run them to the departments that needed them. But they knew that these items were high moving, so instead they brought them back into inventory to issue them out again because it really helped this metric. However, that's not what was beneficial to the organization as a whole. They put a lot of effort and money into this just-in-time delivery methodology, and this was running counter to that. So one of the things that we do when we come on site is we review these metrics and KPIs and make sure that they're balanced. You know, is there another metric out there that offsets some of these detriments? Or is this much focus on one metric going to be detrimental to your organization going forward? And that's one of the things that we also look at. Okay, next slide. A key point to understand in today's discussion is that BI maturity is a journey and not a destination. One last common failure of BI projects is to attempt too large of a scope in the beginning, or what I call boil the ocean strategy. Instead, it is best to get a foundation in place in which to build a mature BI strategy. We're going to go over Gartner's BI maturity model and highlight some key attributes of each stage. What I'd like you to do is to try to attempt to pinpoint where you feel your organization is on this continuum. The first is the unaware stage. This stage is characterized by one-off reporting, typically using spreadsheets. It's really a highly manual environment. The next stage is the opportunistic stage. This stage is defined by parts of the organization or business units within the organization trying to come to their own solution at the expense of the organization as a whole. It does help those business units, but it's often difficult to get data out of those systems. Sometimes they're software as a service, and they have a per-user license. You don't really own your data once it's in their system, and other issues and roadblocks are apparent in this stage. Next comes the standard stage, and this is usually a result of the previous stage. This one is most often identified by the organization attempting to implement an enterprise BI solution, one that can span multiple areas of the business, and data can be shared between each. Next comes the empowerment stage. This stage is characterized by a successful BI implementation where the organization starts to really rely on the BI to help them drive decision-making and add value. The foundational structures are usually in place, such as support from executives, governance, and so on. And often in this stage, department users can use self-service analytics, reducing the burden on traditional IT departments. The last is the transformative stage, and this is really the stage that everybody wants to get to. This is a stage identified when an organization really has become performance-driven, when analytics drive their decision-making and resources are accountable to those metrics. The organization relies on analytics to such a great extent that they usually want to supplement the data they have with other additional information, such as information from other systems, maybe a clinical system, or industry benchmarking information, and possibly even predictive reporting. This is a stage where BI becomes a competitive advantage for the organization. And I want to stress this. This does not happen overnight. Sometimes this is an unrealistic expectation to get to immediately. Oftentimes this is an evolutionary process and requires a lot of hard work and dedication. Now that we understand conceptually what the steps are, I'm going to hand it off to Aaron to talk about practical next steps that an organization can take to increase your maturity and BI value.
Thanks, Ben. So what I'd like to do is start out with a common profile that we see when we come in and we first work with customers about their current state of reporting and business intelligence. So what we normally see when we come in and start work is we see what we call an IT-centric reporting model, where there's a system in place. The organization may be relatively content with doing things, citing reasons such as we do it because this is the way we've always done it. The IT folks maybe feel that they're important in adding value to the process by providing reports or writing reports for the business. But this model often has some pain points that we hear from customers, such as long wait times, right? What often happens is a business analyst will be tasked with an ad hoc question, and they often have to ask somebody else to go and get that data for them. And this can often take hours, days, sometimes even weeks. The results that they get back are often inflexible, right? They may have not understood exactly what you asked for. And so if you need to make a change to that data that you've gotten back, you have to get back in line and wait again for that change to be made by the IT folks. There's often a decentralized manual report creation, which results in a lot of different reports that work and are calculated and look different, which can be confusing when you're trying to talk about the same information across the organization and you have different departmental interpretations of that data and what those numbers mean. You often have siloed data, and this is a result of business analysts through necessity often having to go out and hunt and gather data, right? get an export from one system, update the spreadsheet on my laptop, combine that with the report from another system to get that comprehensive picture. So these are some of the common pain points that we see when we work with customers that have this IT-centric reporting model. And what we want to talk about in the next slide is how we can start to have the discussion about changing from an IT-centric to a more analytic self-service model. So the first step in talking about changing this paradigm is talking to IT and understanding that they're going to continue to add value to the organization, but that their role is going to change. We don't want them to be a producer of content, right? We want them to enable the business to get their own information. Nobody knows better than you, the financial analyst, the director of supply chain, what data you need and when you need it and why. What IT's role is in this new model is to put the technology in place and have the data governed so that it's available and kind of served up on a platter for you as an analyst to go and access that information. So you want to enable that self-service. We say, let the IT folks do the IT work and let the analysts analyze. Our most successful implementations are where this is realized, and we have user-developed content on top of IT-managed infrastructure. So that's an environment where the business analysts are enabled, they have the tools, they understand how to use them, and they can explore that governed data that IT provides to them. They rely and we trust that data because of the governance that's in place. And what this results in is it enables data-driven decision-making, right? Questions come up in meetings, at presentations, email in the morning. You have those data-driven tools that you can use to look at the data from different perspectives in an ad hoc manner. We'll talk a bit about that when we talk about analytical tools and what those are and what the value of those are. But basically allows you to quickly go in and make that data-driven decision and then share that data, maybe with the person that you're communicating that decision to. This is why I made this decision, or I think we should make this decision. One of the other components is starting to do more visual analysis through dashboards, different reports. And what that does is that allows you, what we see when we go and work with a lot of customers who are maybe using Crystal reports, they've got LBI in place. We see reports that come out, they have rows and rows and rows of data, right? And the analyst will spend a lot of time going through each row, looking for those anomalies, maybe comparing rows, this row to the next row, looking for anomalies in each column, etc. But what we see is when we take that type of analysis and do it visually, right, doing something as simple as a line trend, what it allows you to do is to look at massive data sets, and those you don't have to really go hunting for those anomalies because they're going to stand out, right? And then you're able to easily identify those anomalies visually much more quickly than if you have to read through row by row, and then look at that, find that outlier, and then drill down to the detail and decide what it is that you need to do and make a data-driven decision about how you're going to fix that problem you just uncovered. And again, all of this information is being done from a single secure source of truth that allows everybody to be looking at the same data at the same time, right? No more silos, no more John's got this on his laptop, I've got this on my desktop, they don't line up, and then figuring out what the problem is. So again, everybody consuming, analyzing, and then sharing that single source of data. So one of the things I think that's important is just at a very high level to talk about how does this all work, right, from a technology perspective. So one of the things I talked about in the last slide is a single secure source of truth. And one of the important points I'd like to make with this slide is that that doesn't mean data from one system. It means you have a consistent process for bringing in and governing that information. So in this example on this slide, on the left-hand side going from left to right, you can see we have multiple source systems. So for example, we have Infor ERP, which is going to have a majority of your operational data, finance, supply chain, HR, etc. But know that you can combine that with data from other systems. Maybe you use a different budgeting and planning system that you need to integrate with your finance data out of Infor. Or perhaps you want to blend your clinical data with your supply chain data to get total cost per case, right? Know that that's there, and this process supports those types of use cases. So that information is extracted and brought into a tool called Data Warehouse Designer. That's where the data is staged and then transformed into these the analytical cubes that we have on the right. So you can see we have cubes that are pre-built for human capital management, finance, projects and grants, and also supply chain. Once the data is in the cube, it's been modeled and presented, that's when it's served up on a platter, right? All the data is there. And we're not talking about a subset of data, the last 3 months, the last 6 months. This is all of your financial data, all of your supply chain data at your fingertips, so you can easily access and pivot around that data to answer those questions. Once the data is there and available, that's when we talk about using the different visualization tools that are available to you as an analyst or as a business. Infor in particular has a tool called Infor BI, and they also have a new tool they acquired called Burst. Both of those are visualization tools, and that's where you're going to take the data and you're going to then use those visualization tools to create the dashboards with the metrics or the KPIs that you care about. Different reporting widgets that can be reused across different areas. You can access it across mobile devices, and you can also access the same data in Excel if that's the environment that you're most comfortable with. All three are different ways of visualizing that governed data from that single secure source of truth. This next slide I like to talk about because we often get questions from customers about, well, how do I explain to my boss or in my organization, what's the value of analytics? Why do we want to pursue a project like this? And so the example I like to talk about is something that we can all relate to, and it's with how we make travel arrangements now versus how we used to, right? So everybody knows before the modern travel sites came along on the internet, we used travel agents primarily, right? And a travel agent is very similar to the IT-centric model that we talked about earlier. That travel agent was the man in the middle between you and the data that you needed to make a decision about what was the best flight, cruise, whatever that you wanted to book for your family on a trip. So we all know how that worked. You would call them, you would say, you know, I'm really thinking about going to the Caribbean, I'd like to go for a 2-week cruise, etc. You give them that information, they say, great, I'm going to take a look and I'll get back to you, right? If they're good, maybe it was the same day, maybe it was a few days later, you guys would go back and forth, and eventually you get to the point where you were able to make a decision and get that trip booked. The turnaround time was often days or weeks to get that ideal trip. And then you had limited exposure to the data, right? You couldn't see the data that they saw, and you maybe had to talk to 2 or 3 different travel agents to make sure that you're getting the best price. A lot of time and a lot of frustration going through that. Versus how do we book tickets today, right? So we go to Kayak, Orbitz, Expedia, etc., whatever your favorite travel site is, and it's a great example of how analytics work today and how we want them to work for business as well. When you land on that page, you're using an analytical tool, right? You're sitting on top of a massive data set, right? All flights, all destinations globally, every airline for the next 6 months or 12 months. And what they have is they've created an analytical tool that allows you to drill down and put in the parameters that you need, again, to pivot and make an ad hoc analysis. They don't know what questions you're going to ask about your particular flight, but they have a pretty good idea of what are those knobs and levers that they need to put into the tool to allow you to tweak the data and to find that perfect trip. So you go in, and then you put in, you know, departure, arrival, etc., those parameters, and within a matter of minutes, right, you're able to find that perfect trip. You know, you prefer to fly nonstop, you prefer to fly American Airlines, whatever those parameters are, and then you book that flight. So that type of experience is what we want to have on the business side for operational analytics. We want your financial analyst to have a tool like that to answer their questions in their role in the organization. We want supply chain to be able to have these types of tools. And so that's what we're referring to when we talk about the value of analytics and what are some of these analytical tools that we create. It's about creating an experience that allows you to manipulate and make data-driven decisions in your role within the organization. Okay. So when we talk about that implementation, one of the things we advocate is people often say, well, how do I start? You know, that sounds complex. I've maybe spent a lot of time in the past navigating relational tables in Infor and trying to find, you know, put all the pieces together and, you know, doing left outer joins and inner joins, etc., to get the data. It sounds complex to get all that. And it is. And so what we advocate is not starting and doing that work by yourself from scratch, we recommend that you leverage Infor's pre-built analytics. They have over 300 plus pre-built KPIs and metrics for finance, supply chain, human capital, and also project accounting. These are going to be common KPIs. A lot of these haven't changed in a very long time, right? Everybody knows, days cash on hand is something that's relatively common, right? So we advocate, again, don't spend your time kind of reinventing the wheel. Infor owns the product. They understand those relational data structures. They've already done the data modeling for you, and they have it pre-built in those cubes, right? So don't spend your time starting with a blank sheet of paper, building common business metrics and KPIs yourself. Because the other thing is, if you build those yourself, chances of those going forward and working in the next version are very slim. Versus if you use Infor's healthcare analytics, those are going to be supported. If you're on version 9 and going to version 10, it's going to upgrade and work. You don't have to redo or revalidate your reporting. If you're on 10 and you're thinking about going to the 11, again, all those same KPIs and metrics will be available because you've utilized what's been developed by Infor for their product. So again, we advocate when you're starting out, spend your time building, thinking about those tools, thinking about self-service. What are the common questions that you get, and what are some different reports, dashboards, and visualizations that you could use to make yourself and your organization more efficient. The next slide I'm going to touch on just briefly our implementation methodology. What does this look like and how do we do this? So this is a methodology that has been and continues to be refined. With every implementation, we learn something new, and we take the feedback from our customers very seriously. So this is a model that's adapted over numerous implementations with our customers. And the way we've currently structured is, it starts with the discovery workshop. That is when we send the primary functional consultants on site to work with you in your business to define value up front. No commitment, just about a week's worth of your time to conduct that discovery and plan what it is that you want to accomplish. Phase 1 is then the implementation, where we get the technology, we give you the training that you need, and then deliver those value add components or define a discovery, and then phase 2 can be continued enhancements and development. I'll go into a little more detail on those on the next slide. So the discovery workshop, so that's very important, because we want to make sure that you have, before you commit to doing a phase 1, we want to make sure that you have a good plan in place. We're going to come in and we're going to help you make sure you understand who are the influencers. We're going to help you with the business justification. We're going to give you a ramp plan, so that'll consist of, assessing your current skill sets and any gaps in that, and then tailoring the training and education plan to you and your organization and the people that you have working with you. We're going to look at your data. How's it structured? Where do you want to get it from? How much data is there? What are the governance requirements? Do you have governance in place, etc.? And we'll help you get that set up. We'll give you an overview of the infrastructure and how that will be laid out and what's required. And then we're also going to talk about those role-based rights. Who needs to access what and why? So when we're done with that discovery, what you're going to get is you're going to have a comprehensive prescriptive implementation plan that's tailored for you and your organization and your particular business unit. So what we see is when we work with customers, it normally starts out with one business unit wanting to take the lead. Maybe supply chain is really wanting to do better reporting and analytics, or it's finance, etc. We'll give that department then that tailored plan. That plan is something that comes out of discovery, and you can choose to execute on that right away, or it's something you can put in the shelf and maybe say, you know what, this is great. I'm glad we've done this work and analysis together, but maybe we need to wait a few months for next fiscal year, next budget, or whatever. But at least you have the plan, you've done the analysis, and that's something that's very easy to update or refresh if you choose to defer that implementation until later. Again, so phase 1, if you choose to engage and then implement that plan, we come in, we install all the technology and set everything up. We build the cubes for the different business areas, and we get the technology in place. We also offer comprehensive on-site training through our educational team, and they're going to teach you about all the different tools that you have available to you as an analyst, and also the data that's available. These KPIs and metrics, they look great, but where are they, and how do I use them, and how do I combine them, right? It's about enabling you, the analyst, to be able to access that information that's going to be served up to you. And then phase 2 is another engagement if you continue to do more enhancement and developments going forward. So that consists of, maybe complex development or specialized projects that you would want going forward. So that's kind of our overview of what does an implementation look like, what's the value of doing it, and how does the technology work together. So we like to end on a high note on our presentations and talk about imagining you and your organization, right? If you had comprehensive data integrity, right? Trusting the information that comes out of your systems and your reports. So you're not questioning whether that data is right. You're just looking at the information and doing the analysis and knowing that you can trust it because you have the governance and integrity in place. Industry recognition. Ben's example he talked about was fantastic, where he was able to move his organization's ranking up from number 323 to number 11 in the nation. Being able to justify business decisions easily, right? No more of this, well, I thought it was going to go this way, or it felt like this was going to happen. Make a data-driven decision, right? Be able to get that information and share it and justify it, whether you have to send that to your executives, your customers, or maybe your peers within the organization. Use the data to justify why that decision was made going forward. And most importantly, every customer we work with spends more time than they would like doing manual reporting, collecting data, assembling that data, creating those reports maybe on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. A lot of those reporting processes can be automated and streamlined. We can look at having a governance model in place that collects the data for you and then presents it, and then talk about enabling some self-service tools. So you no longer have to assemble and present data to individuals or different roles within your organization. You can create those self-service tools that allow them to get the information whenever they need it, and it's always up to date. So we like to tell people, think about creating this report for the last time, because once you're done creating it, it's always going to be up to date, and you're going to get that time back every month, and that's going to free you up or your department up to spend more time doing deeper data-driven analytical work and less time doing manual reporting activities. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jenny to just kind of summarize the webinar and talk about what we've learned in our next steps.
So if I could sing really good, I would go, ah! I mean, that picture and everything sounds really, really awesome. And by chunking things off in a smaller perspective, we're able to help bring value and help you move on to the next thing. And that's what we're trying to do is develop some success up front. So we hope that you felt some appreciation for us understanding what some of your common pain points might be, and how BI doesn't have to be something that's so big you can't tackle it. You can start to take a walk, and you can bring in things, and then maybe you're ready for a hill, and then maybe you're ready to do a bigger hill and move on from there. And so what we're going to try to do is help you provide that BI maturity model to help you take in those simple steps to get some success and build on that and bring your organization to better clarity in terms of what's going on. And so I hope that you're able to take away a little bit today and figure out how it might relate to you. And if you're interested, if some of the things we've talked about have some meaning, the next steps that we would look at is really trying to schedule just a small amount of time with you to figure out where your pain points are and talk about how we would address those, how we have addressed those with other customers, and then what the next step might be. And it's a really small step. It's typically like a week on site doing kind of a whiteboarding session to determine, where the data issues are, and developing a little bit of a plan to tackle some of the things that are maybe the biggest rock in your shoe. And so just excited that everybody was able to join us. And if we can move to the next slide, please. And so at this point, and as Danielle mentioned, you're able to type in any questions you might have had, or you can raise your hand. She's going to be moderating some of those. I see that we have at least a couple questions that have already come in during the webinar. And so I'm just going to read these and throw these out to our experts. The first question is, what is the typical time frame for a discovery or phase 1 implementation? And actually, I think I know the answer to that. Ben and Aaron, you can back me up. But we typically see that being between, a 10 to 12 week time frame. The first week is spent doing some deep discovery with clients and getting those business requirements down. Then we go away for a little while, look at those requirements, figure out the best tools, present a plan, and then develop that plan. And then the end of that phase is usually with, user acceptance, presenting it, making sure everything is in line. So that's the first step. I do have one other here that came in. Let me just look. So with the customers we've worked with, what is the average amount of time that people usually spend creating and distributing reports? So, that's a variable thing depending on the tools that they might have in place and, what they've done previously. But we do see people spending upwards of 25 to 65% of their time working on these processes. And so it is a huge drain. And by the time the folks that are really interested in it get the information, it's no longer, fresh. So that is something else we encounter.
Hey, Jenny, we did get someone to raise their hand, Andre Moss from CHS. Andre, if you're out there, I'm going to try to unmute you and see if we can hear your question, okay? All right, Andre, you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Can.
First, let me say, thank you for the presentation. It was an awesome presentation. I've actually been working with ROI for the past 3 years. I worked with, Ben's been here working with us for a while, and I've also worked with Jimmy Haddad and Bill Stark. So I have not had the opportunity to work with Fortude, but I can speak to ROI and kind of the awesome job that they do and their attention to detail. I do have a couple of questions. I do want to ask maybe Ben, or I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the other gentleman's name. Is it Rob?
Aaron.
Aaron. I do want to get their thoughts on this. So for smaller organizations or for smaller hospitals, the IS team and the business partners are a little bit more closely aligned, right? Because it's a smaller organization. Here at Community Health Systems, we are a huge organization. And what you run into is that the business partners have a need, right? So we are using Lawson Supply Chain, Lawson General Ledger, Lawson AP, all of that good stuff. And inside of Lawson, you have healthcare analytics, you have supply chain analytics, you have things of that nature. But on the flip side, on the IS side, they are moving more toward an EDW model, and they're using Cognos. And so there are times when, in some organizations, the IS department may not necessarily want to dedicate the resources and the money to building out Lawson and kind of its BI capabilities because they're already going down this separate road. So I think my first question is how do you handle those types of scenarios where the business partners want one thing, they're utilizing Lawson, but the IS team may not necessarily want to build out Lawson anymore or dedicate any more resources to building out Lawson because they're using the EDW and they're going toward a more like an application like Cognos. So under this scenario, it sounds like there are certain steps that you guys take, and I think Aaron went over one scenario where he said, well, maybe we just come in and we basically almost do a gap analysis and perform a gap analysis for you, and maybe that's the only thing that we do. So is this a from a soup to nuts? Can we take a phased approach in terms of, yes, we need your expertise here, but we don't necessarily need it here in another area? Because the complexity and the things that we are dealing with, and Ben knows this, is that ROI helped us a lot on the business side, but AVAP, we've been using them as our system implementation partner. So at these larger organizations, there's just a lot going on. There's more silos. You know, how do you help bridge that connection between what IS is willing to do versus what the business partners want to accomplish and how far they want to take it?
Sure, and I'll take that. That's a common situation that we've encountered with different customers. Of course, the scenario we walked through here is you're assuming you're using all the pieces for the entire solution. But what we do in a case like that is we often come together because it's important for us to play kind of that liaison role between the business partners and between IT and translate between them, right? Sometimes IT doesn't understand what the business is asking and vice versa. So there can be frustration on both sides. And so what we often do is we work with them to make sure that everybody understands what it is that we're asking to do and that we have a good plan together. So for example, in your case, you talked about, well, IT, they already have an enterprise data warehouse that they're using, so they just shut it down and said, no, we're not going to do that. Well, when we get down to the details of it, depending on what their strategy is for an enterprise data warehouse, the cubes that Infor delivers out of the box that are going to model all that finance, supply chain, and HR data may plug right into their enterprise data warehouse without them having to do anything, right? The healthcare analytics is built on Microsoft SQL Server analysis services. Many of the customers that we work with have that as their enterprise data platform, and if that's the case, it's not about bringing in a new solution. It's just about dovetailing what Infor provides and integrating that with their enterprise strategy. So it can be seamless, and that's why it's important, and that's why we advocate that we do that discovery session first, because we're going to find out those things, and we're going to help you navigate what it is that we can do, or what's a tailored plan for your organization depending on your unique situation.
And I think what I just heard you say, Aaron, is we can figure out what your existing platforms look like and try to provide the least disruptive way to go about meeting everyone's needs.
Exactly.
I'm going to piggyback on what Aaron said as well. At the hospital system I came from, we did implement healthcare analytics, and then there was an initiative to do an enterprise data warehouse. And just as Aaron described, what we did is we actually extracted information from the healthcare analytics cubes that were built in SQL Server and incorporated that information into our enterprise data warehouse. And the benefit we found from that was that our IT department, which was also siloed, they didn't have to figure out all these roll-ups and design the business process in this data model. It was already done for us by Infor, and it gave us a huge head start on our EDW. So you can actually do both, and I think they're both synchronous.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Danielle, is there an opportunity for me to ask 2 more questions?
Well, it is. Yeah, you know what? Go ahead. You can ask your questions. It's 1 minute after, and we do have a raffle at the end, but we definitely, want you to be able to ask questions. So
I tell you what, let's do this. I can actually hold my questions, and why don't we just follow the 30-minute catch-up, or the 30-minute kind of discovery that was mentioned earlier. That way, we keep on the schedule. We're respectful of everyone's time.
That sounds great, and we can also share your question and our answer with the group as well, so they can benefit.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So this is Jenny again. So now it's time for the exciting part, drum roll for the raffle. And the winner is Teresa Coward from Munson Health. And Teresa, I will reach out with you to make sure that we're able to provide you with your new Amazon Echo, and it will be pre-set with a make sure to contact ROI and Fortude for further information on your to-do list. And if we can move on to the next slide. So the next thing that we just want to talk about is that we do have a next webinar coming up. So if any of this was interesting for you, we're going to be redoing this live and probably improving a little bit upon my parts at least on November 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, you know, if you have found interest, the 30-minute session or hour session, depending on what you need, is completely complimentary. We just want to share our information with you and see if there are next steps we could take to help you move on to that maturity model. So, so much appreciate everyone's participation today, and thank you, Danielle, Ben, and Erin, for you know, just making this a really worthwhile session. So thank you, and if you have any questions, you can reach us at these different email addresses or reply to the webinar email for further information.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day. Make it a great day. The choice is yours.